Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Zuckel with Pangea Keto, and I have the honor of having some time to sit down with Dr. Volek and Dr. Phinney. Combined, these gentlemen have 60 years worth of research in the ketogenic field, and it's a great honor. So I would like for them to give their own quick little introduction as we get started.
Sure. So my name's Steve Phinney. I'm a physician by training. Have, as Jeff implied, spent quite a few decades doing nutrition research, and much of that is focused on the ketogenic diet. And the reason for that is that when we use it, it works, unlike most other diets or programs. And that's really what I followed in my career.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. I'm Jeff Volek. I currently a professor at Ohio State University, and I run a research lab there that's really focused on understanding the ketogenic diet. We really are experts in formulating, implementing the diet in different populations with the idea that we'll understand better how people respond to them. And following up on Steve's introduction, we've made a lot of really important discoveries in terms of the profound health benefits associated with the ketogenic diet. Still a lot to learn yet, but what we've discovered to date is very powerful.
Well, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. And again, thank you for taking some time to stop up here in beautiful Canton, Ohio. And what I'd like to ask you guys are things that I hear every day from my customers. And a lot of that is, some misconceptions about the diet and the lifestyle. So I'll leave it to you guys to kind of, pick up the ball with it. But, one of the big things we always hear is if I eat, a lot more fat in my diet, my cholesterol is going to continue to go up. And my doctor says that's probably not a good idea. So what kind of, conversation we have on that?
I'll be happy to start out. It's a big topic, Jeff, and I would agree with you. It's a common concern that we hear about that stems back really 40 plus years now. We've been demonizing fat in general as a cause of a lot of problems ranging from obesity to heart disease to diabetes. What I'll say, just kind of as a broad statement, is we're now turning the corner on that, I'll say, dogma, because the science is pretty clear now that fat's not the enemy. And especially when you're following a ketogenic diet, you really need to make peace with fat. It's the most important nutrient in many ways, at least in terms of being the primary source of your calories on a ketogenic diet is coming from fat. Now, when I got into this field about 25 years ago, I was really focused and even a bit concerned that, maybe we are doing some harm to people by feeding them all this fat. So we really focused on understanding cholesterol responses and really extending beyond cholesterol and looking at a lot of different cardiovascular risk factors. And to sort of summarize many years and many manuscripts that we've published, what we've discovered now and understand now is that when you follow a ketogenic diet and you look at all these advanced cardiovascular, cardiometabolic risk factors, the vast majority of them, almost all of them, improve quite dramatically. Triglycerides go down, your good HDL cholesterol increases, the quality of your LDL particles improves. You get rid of these really small atherogenic particles that cause damage. They go down. Your inflammatory markers improve, and your glucose and your insulin levels improve. And we know these contribute to ultimately higher risk for heart disease.
And you have seen this over 20 years of doing research. We see it over and over and over. It's not like one study had this happen and we're jumping on riding that wagon. It's pretty much every time we go down that and do studies along those lines, we see the same thing happen.
Yeah, my first paper that I published in 1980 demonstrated
1980, folks.
beneficial effects on good cholesterol, beneficial effects on triglycerides, effective weight loss of people eating healthy fats to satiety, and yet they lose weight. It's not because it melts off body fat, it's they are satiated. The hunger triggers in the body respond far better to fat than it does to carbs, and even to protein. But what Jeff and I have, first I alone, and I got very lonely because nobody believed anything I published.
It was 1980, folks. That's right when the food pyramid came out and said, eat carbs.
And don't eat fat. And then, Jeff read my papers, and, we met at a meeting, and he was quoting my papers. And this was a revelation because it hadn't happened before. But we've been able to explore, particularly this issue around the so-called LDL cholesterol, which is called, people casually call it the bad cholesterol. But actually, it comes in multiple components. And what Jeff was saying, some of those are very dangerous, the small ones, and the larger ones are not as dangerous. In fact, may be beneficial. And what happens when you follow a ketogenic diet is your LDL total level in the blood may go down or it may go up, but the dangerous particles in every study we've done go down, and the beneficial particles actually go up. And so we see a shift within this category, but that's more sophisticated than most doctors are actually trained to do or trained to understand. And they want it to be simple, and it's not, it's complex. But when you look at it with a magnifying glass, you really see that the broad spectrum effect of this, including inflammation, which is a root cause of many of our chronic diseases, including diabetes, get improved. And we've now demonstrated in a 2-year study, and we're about to publish 5-year data, that we sustain those benefits in people with type 2 diabetes for a long period of time. And it's not just a few people. It's a lot of, a very significant percentage of the people who start with us and adopt this lifestyle with proper coaching and support, and with access to good, keto, not fake foods, but real foods that are keto friendly. That's what Pangea does. Have the ability to follow this long term. And that's really the key factor, is sustainability.
And going back to the real food issue, and I met you guys because of my own personal journey. I was 350, type 2 diabetic. I did get gastric bypass 6 years ago, but I've continued to keep the weight off, maintain it. And I started Pangea Keto strictly because I wanted to offer great food, real food, to people who are struggling to try and stay on the ketogenic diet. And through that process, I reached out to Dr. Volek, and through him, I've met Dr. Phinney, and it's been a great journey. And again, I just want to appreciate your time being here today. Going back to inflammation, though, people talk about good fats, bad fats, and I think most people understand that, saturated fat and monounsaturated, so your butters, your coconut oil, as far as the saturated goes, animal tallow, that kind of thing. And then you have your monos, which is your olive and avocado. Those are your mainstays, generally speaking. And then from the inflammation side, is there anything like on seed oils or anything that you guys would like the general public to basically a big picture view of some of those?
Yeah. Well, there are a wide variety of seed oils. I mean, nuts actually are seeds. Yeah. And there are some nut oils that are very good and high in mono. But the mainstay of agriculture and agricultural fats are soybean oil and corn oil. And they do contain what are called some essential fatty acids. But we only need like a half teaspoon of essential fats from that category per day. We don't need a half a cup. Yeah. So when you look at what most mayonnaise are made out of, for instance, it's made out of soybean oil, and you're getting an overdose of, if you will, of these types of oils, and that can be harmful. And there is some evidence that it actually promotes inflammation. Okay. But if you keep them in moderation in the diet, that can be influenced. But we think that the primary anti-inflammatory effect of what and this has only come to light in research just published in the last eight or so years, is the primary factor in a ketogenic diet that turns down the inflammatory flame in the body is actually the ketone that our bodies make from the good fats we eat in the liver and circulate through the blood. And it's a fuel for the brain, it's a fuel for your heart, but it also turns out it's a signal to your cells to turn down their inflammatory status and protect the body from oxidative stress. And this is basically a revolution understanding, because when I was taught as a physician back when the dinosaurs walked the earth, in the 1960s, I was taught that ketones were toxic byproducts of fat, and they were dangerous because true in people with type 1 diabetes, who when they don't take insulin, don't get enough insulin, their ketone levels are uninhibitedly high, and that becomes toxic. But that's a number of 10 to 20 up here. On a well-formulated ketogenic diet, you're typically in a 1 to 3 range down here. And that's the beneficial range. So we call that nutritional ketosis. This is ketoacidosis. We have to differentiate. There's not a subtle difference.
And it's a long way to go from there to there. And most of that's type 1
But then if
diet.
you have orange juice and a bagel for breakfast, and then a donut in mid-morning with your coffee, your ketones are down here. And you don't have that therapeutic benefit of the epigenetic signaling. These ketones actually regulate the activity of very good genes we're born with. We put those genes to sleep when we eat all this carb and juice and processed stuff. And when you are in nutritional ketosis, it turns that process on. And inborn protections that we all have are awakened by this lifestyle. And this is a revolutionary, this is now true, this is an understood scientific mechanism. It's not a hypothesis anymore. But for the first 30 years of my 40 years of research, I didn't understand how that worked. I knew it worked.
Yeah.
I'm glad I lived long enough
the mechanism
to understand the mechanism. We can now tell people in complete honesty, this is how it works. And as long as you sustain the ketones, you sustain the benefit.
I know another thing that I hear a lot from my customers at the store is, a lot of them are joining clubs and fitness centers, and they think they're going to out-exercise their diet, or exercise. People go to the gym 5 times a week, and I'm just like, exercise is important for some things, but as far as weight loss goes, it's probably not your primary way to lose weight. So, Jeff, I know you do a lot of studies with athletes and stuff.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic around exercise and weight loss. I actually just taught a course on this, to undergraduate students at Ohio State. And I have to start this out by saying my PhD is in exercise physiology and exercise science. I'm a huge advocate for exercise. I think there's a lot of research supporting the health benefits of being active. But when you look at the evidence, exercise is a really poor weight loss tool. So if you just implement an exercise intervention in a group of people and don't address diet, there are study after study that show it does not manifest in significant weight loss. And it's a bit of a head scratcher because, you're expending calories when you're exercising, so that you should naturally think, well, that should add up to significant fat loss over time. But what happens, and this gets into a bit of complexity here, and we don't have all the answers, but in some people, when they exercise, they eat more, they get hungry.
Work up an appetite, yes.
And so whatever calories you burned off, you compensate for, and some people compensate even more than they burned off. So, you end up maintaining or potentially even gaining weight. But the other really interesting response to exercise in people who are restricting calories and trying to lose weight is that their metabolic rate goes down if they add exercise to caloric restriction. So they're actually burning less calories at rest.
Yes.
If you add exercise. And this sort of flies in the face of the conventional wisdom that says, hey, exercise increases your metabolic rate. So there are some, biological reasons why exercise is not a good weight loss tool. So just to tell people who are trying to lose weight, go to the gym more, you need to exercise more, without
Eat less,
really
exercise
addressing
more.
the diet piece, is often doomed for failure.
When you read research or hear about new research studies they've done. They talk about they did something in rats and it worked. Put it aside and forget about it until they do it in humans. Because male rats, when you exercise them, it speeds their metabolic rate. Humans are not rats. We are a different species, and our response is very different. And so you have to be to be very cautious about studies that aren't rigorously done, and definitely studies that aren't done in humans. And so something that makes Dr. Volek and myself different is, for the most part, we only study humans because that's the species we want to treat, and the ones who, we have an epidemic of obesity and diabetes, and so we have to do research that's valid for the people we treat.
Going back to what you were saying about the calorie restriction and exercising, again, at the store, we hear a lot of people saying, I don't eat more than 1,200 calories a day. And I'm not a PhD, I'm not a researcher. I tell them my opinion and why that's probably not the best thing. But just someone being so focused on calories, why is that also not the best road to go down?
Well, I think history shows us pretty clearly that counting calories and treating weight loss sort of from a mathematical perspective is also doomed to fail.
Yeah, it's not an equal scale, calories in, calories out.
What we've learned, both in the lab and empirically, is that when you get the ketogenic diet right, you don't have to count calories. So we do not, when we're teaching and coaching and supporting people on the ketogenic diet, we're not prescribing a specific caloric level. And what we find is that people who have excess weight, when they're in ketosis and restricting carbs and eating a moderate amount of protein, that they naturally or spontaneously eat less because they're full.
Yeah.
And part of that is, the principal metabolic adaptation to a ketogenic diet is you become very efficient and better at burning your own body fat. And so these people may not be eating a lot of calories, but their cells are getting a lot of energy because they're breaking down their own body fat.
Yeah,
and
you're feeding off yourself.
Fat is, you're serving as a fuel source for other cells in the body. And so in the end, it makes the weight loss easier. People can restrict calories with less perceived effort. They're not as hungry. They're not tired because they're being fed
when
by
you're in ketosis, it's easier.
Fat.
Your insulin level is a lot lower, so your body's able to use the fat for energy. And when you restrict calories and have carbs, you have more insulin, which doesn't allow you to tap into your stored body fat for fuel. So then you're hungry instead of feeding off yourself when you're in ketosis.
Correct.
Yeah, insulin's a big player. It does play a primary role in controlling body fat stores.
It runs like energy penitentiary. So it is the prison warden that tells you go to those cells and stay there and don't come out. And so it's basically it's a very powerful storage hormone. So what we see with people who have diabetes and their blood sugar is high, if you can't control it with pills, we switch to insulin. But insulin's the storage hormone, so it makes blood sugar go down by turning that sugar into fat and sticking it in your penitentiary cells, which is body adipose tissue. When we start a well-formulated ketogenic diet, in most of our patients who are taking type 2 diabetes, because they needed it to control their blood sugar, when we take away most of their carbs, and again, it's not a zero carb diet. Yeah. We allow, but it's 2 tablespoons worth of carbs total per day. When we start with somebody who's severely metabolically impaired as type 2 diabetes, when we take away most of those carbs, we have to promptly reduce their insulin intake. And more than half of the patients that we treat with a well-formulated ketogenic, we get them completely off of insulin with much better blood sugar control. And that, taking away that storage hormone, then gives their body permission to burn that stored fat, to let the prisoners out of those cells and be used for energy.
When my A1C was 11.6 before, overachiever. But, I had the gastric bypass surgery, and that was 6 years ago. And, went from 350 to about 180, 190. And I'm happy at that level right now. And, but I went in for hernia surgery last year, and I'm not another person who monitors every day and check my glucose. I mean, I kind of do my thing, and I know I'm being a good boy and eating right. But because I had diabetes, they had to do a glucose check on me. And I'm like, oh boy, this ought to be interesting. But she came back and it was 81. And I was very, very happy with that. She's like, wow, that's really low. As a nurse in a regular hospital, she's used to seeing some crazy numbers. And that's how I started telling her what I do for a living. And now she's a good customer at the store.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I hear a lot about, and Steve, I've seen you on several videos talk about salt intake. We got a lot of heart people coming in, and they've been told, stay away from salt. Salt's the devil. It's going to increase your blood pressure. And I said, if you're eating the standard American diet, that may be true. But if you're eating a ketogenic diet, salt may actually be helping.
Yeah, Jeff Volek mentioned the dietary guidelines. And when they came out, they said, eat less fat and eat less salt. And they were correct in one sense, that if you eat less fat, in order to get enough energy, you have to eat carbs, because the human body doesn't like to burn much in the way of protein as energy. So we're not talking about high protein here. Take away the fat, you have to eat carbs. Carbs cause your body to retain sodium. And if you have high blood pressure or congestive heart failure, then yeah, you retain the sodium and you can't lie down because the fluid fills your lungs. You get edema in your legs and so on. So yeah, if you're eating a high carb, particularly a high processed carb, refined carb diet, you have to restrict sodium. But we basically move to a different world when we go into nutritional ketosis, because these ketone bodies, I said, they circulate through the blood, we burn them for fuel in our brain and our heart. But the signal in the kidneys is tell the kidneys to get rid of salt. And so this acts, medically we call that a diuretic, like a diuretic pill, but this is an internally produced diuretic effect. And if you go on a ketogenic diet and you restrict your sodium too much, you'll be lightheaded, dizzy, easily fatigued. You stand up and you feel, ooh, I better sit down. Even patients become constipated, and that's because the body has become dehydrated. You can't keep water in the body unless you have salt. And that's oftentimes called the keto flu, and it's not a flu infection. It's a group of symptoms which are due to inadequate sodium. And the actual, the dietary guidelines say 2.7 grams of sodium per day. Our experience is when you're in nutritional ketosis, those guidelines have to be changed to adapt to the ketogenic state, and you need between 4 and 5 grams of sodium per day, unless you have severe hypertension and are on medicines. You're still retaining sodium on the ketogenic diet, or if you have congestive heart failure and so on. But for most patients, all those issues of quote, sodium retention go away, and then we have to give them sodium supplementally in the form of bone broth or bouillon to maintain their sense of well-being and function. So it's a different world, and the rules are different. If you fly from here to the UK, to England, and get off a plane in London and you rent a car, you do not drive on the right side of the road. And if you go keto, you have to rethink how you deal with sodium and adjust that to your needs so you don't have these symptoms of lightheadedness, dizziness, fatigue, and constipation.
All right. One other thing that we've talked about, and there's a lot of new issues, and you guys are on the cutting edge of it. We all know that the ketogenic diet's great for diabetes. I was a type 2 diabetic with the A1C of 11.6, and now I don't take any medications whatsoever. I just wanted to hit on because I have seen customers come in the store and they say, well, I have my insulin, or I have my metformin, or I manage it with my pills. And I like to say, if I had a store out front and said, come in and eat whatever you want, just every time you leave, you have to take these pills in order to survive. I like to say you can come to my store and eat whatever you want, and you don't have to take any pills because I didn't spike your blood sugar. So a lot of people have the misconception just because they keep their blood glucose levels in line with their medication that they're healthy. And I like to say that the insulin, the metformin, whatever it is, it's doing its job. It's taking the glucose out of your blood, but it's not really leaving your body. It's kind of being wedged somewhere else that it probably doesn't belong either. Am I correct in thinking that way, or is, because a lot of people have that feeling that, oh, it's managed, I don't have to worry about it. I can have this regular soda now.
All medicines that are effective at treating diabetes have side effects. So reducing medication is beneficial, not just in saving costs of healthcare, but improving sense of well-being and function. I do want to say that if somebody has type 2 diabetes and they're on medication, they need to consult their physician and tell their physician what they're going to do, because they will need to have their medicines adjusted. They should not do that. You should not do that on your own.
Yeah.
You need to do it with medical guidance. And that's one of the challenges here, particularly in a condition like type 2 diabetes, is physicians haven't been trained to do that. They've been trained to give medicine, but the idea that we can fly them from high carb America to wherever low carb, where they drive on the other side of the street, that when they do that, they have to have expert medical support to do that. And that's the challenge, that we have to train physicians to do that. And we've given our books away free to many physicians just to get that message out there. But it is, it's a great result, but it has to be done in a responsible way.
And this is something that Dr. Phinney's been working on for over 40 years, Dr. Volek over 20 years. We are seeing a generally more acceptance of this way of eating, this lifestyle. I'm trying to make it easier for people to do through my stores and franchising. And we're starting to see the wheels roll a little quicker. You're starting to see other products show up on store shelves. We just want to make sure that we make it with the correct ingredients in the right way. What are some of the things, new areas of health that are starting to wake up that may show, I think there's a lot of health issues that get better on the ketogenic diet, but what are a few of the things that you see kind of on the horizon that some people are poking around with?
Well, it's exciting times, Jeff, because I like to describe the 70s, 80s, 90s as the dark ages of nutrition, because, there's virtually little to no research on ketogenic diets. Everyone was studying low-fat diets, and so we just, wasted several decades that we could have been doing good research, with a few notable exceptions, like Steve was an anomaly, actually publishing, research in the 80s on ketogenic diets. But ever since about 2000, there's been this progressive, and I would describe it as exponential increase in interest in publications of really credible studies around ketogenic diets. And that's really exciting. Where do we have the most solid evidence? Well, we've actually known for 100 years that ketogenic diets are very effective at treating epilepsy, especially in kids with intractable seizures.
Which I have with this cute little scar on my head. I had that brain surgery. So again, my epilepsy medication's been basically eradicated, but I still take a small dose.
So we have, I'd say strong evidence to support its use in that application. And then the other area that's, actually been known for a long time, but we actually haven't done the more rigorous studies into more recently, is in the area of diabetes that Steve's been talking about. So, and that includes pre-diabetes as well as metabolic syndrome and just, obesity and using ketogenic diets for weight loss purposes. We now have not a couple studies, not even a dozen studies, but we're talking about hundreds of studies now, not just our lab. All sorts of researchers around the globe really have published in this area now. So that's very established. But what's, some of the newer areas that people are exploring now, including work we're doing at Ohio State, is trying to understand, can ketogenic diets help people with cancer? ketogenic diets help people with neurological conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and even complications of diabetes like heart failure and chronic kidney disease. These are areas we're pursuing. We don't have the rigorous clinical trials
But you got to start somewhere.
performed yet, but based on the evidence we do have to date, I think we have a pretty good hypothesis that we'll likely see some positive signals, but I can't sit here today and say
do the work
we
first.
have definitive evidence
Yep.
that it works in these conditions, but there are a lot of people interested in this topic now. I'd like to say the genie's out of the bottle. People are studying this in rigorous ways, and over the next several years and decades, we're going to continue to see a lot of published data that help us understand the different applications. But I would just end by saying we do know the diet's safe, generally very safe for people. We don't know, if it's truly efficacious in all these different medical conditions, but we know it works very well in diabetes, type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, and really most conditions associated with insulin resistance. I think that's where we have the really strong evidence now. But stay tuned. There's a lot of
Lots to come.
a lot of the new data to come soon.
And the other point is this is a lifestyle. It's not something that one should undertake casually because it is complex, and most people need some degree of expert guidance. I'm not going to promote our books, but there is information in there that is useful. And one of the best things to do is if your doctor is willing to consider it, give your doctor a copy of our book and let her or him read the book to help guide you, because most people do need expert guidance and coaching if they want to do this well. But when it's done well, it's sustainable long term. Jeff has been on it longer than I have long
You
term.
have the book right over there. I got one of your books. One's at the store. The high performance one, and then this is the one that I have here at the house. The Art and Science of the Low Carb Living. These guys are authors of this, and then the other book's title is
Art and Science of Low Carb Performance. So that's geared a little more to our athlete friends. So
this is the
said,
one
what about
more
us?
for regular folks like us.
They're both internally
We
consistent.
couldn't find a publisher to publish anything with this much heresy in it, so we self-published it, and it's only available through Amazon. But that means it's available anywhere on Earth now,
So I have this in my house, and
and the current price is less than $10. And then I would want to just say that this is should be a credible treatment, not just for people who have diseases, but if you have a family history of diabetes or a family history of heart disease, that this is something that one can follow it in a maybe somewhat less rigorous form, where your ketones are like here, not here, but you're significantly restricting carbs, cutting out almost all sugar, and this may be a effective preventative tool, because I'd much rather prevent a condition than treat one.
sure.
So varying degrees of getting within your personal level of carbohydrate tolerance. So type 2 diabetes is severe carbohydrate intolerance. We have to go way down. But if you have a family history of type 2 diabetes, you may be able to avoid that progression with a more moderate degree of carbohydrate restriction and limiting the simple sugars and highly refined carbs. And still having a very satisfying diet with, and again, our point here is this is not a high protein diet, but in order to get a balanced range of nutrients, we recommend that people eat 4 or 5 servings of non-starchy vegetables and some berry fruits each day. So this is not a pure
It's
diet.
not.
This is the highest volume of what I eat are the vegetables in my diet.
You have your own garden, and you're a big proponent of gardening and having
locavore nutrition. Eat things that are grown near you, preferably outside your back door if you have the space to do it.
Well, I appreciate your guys' time. Is there any like big, like one or two big simple takeaways for, our customers and some of the viewers to kind of just drive home.
Yeah, I maybe just piggyback on what Steve just said. I'd like to leave folks with the idea that we have to sort of recalibrate in our heads what's normal, because I think this diet still gets cast as a sort of fringe concept that's very unorthodox, and you just have to eat these limited foods, and it's exactly the opposite. I mean, this is the normal way humans were built to eat, and we prefer to burn fat for fuel. And this is a diet that is very internally consistent with that. It accelerates your body's ability to burn fat, and it allows a lot of variety, as Steve was talking about. So even the most culinary, curious and creative people have so much to work with on this eating, pattern. So yes, you will have to say goodbye to some foods like potatoes and cereals and rice and so forth. But you can also now incorporate so many other, pleasurable and savory foods into your diet. And this is what I really love about what you've done, Jeff. I mean, you guys are at the bleeding edge of being creative and innovative with ketogenic foods, and how you've been able to make this extremely pleasurable to do. I mean, it's really incredible what Pangea has done.
I appreciate that. I started the store as a small little grocer, and now it's evolved, and we've now have a whole bistro, and then you guys saw the menu, and we have everything from, double cheeseburger and fries to cauliflower bowls and zoodles and everything in between, quesadillas. And I'm just trying to make it sustainable and easy for people to eat this way. I believe in, 15, 20, 30 years that most restaurants will be that way, but unfortunately that's not the case right now. But we're trying to help push that forward, just like you guys are helping pushing the research forward. So we're all trying to row the boat in the same direction, and I appreciate your time. Any parting words from you, Steve?
Just what Jeff said. The two Jeffs said, I walked into your store for the first time ever today, and I just looked around and I said, nobody can say that this is a highly restrictive diet, because what you have there resembles what most people currently eat, but you've taken away the highly refined carbs and the sugars, and you've given people delicious and satisfying alternatives. And so it's not a highly restricted diet. You just have to change the ingredients in the recipes to things that don't make insulin go up. And those options now are beautifully expressed in what you're doing. And I want to thank you for, taking something that is we can do, because Jeff and I cook our own foods in our own kitchen and so on, and you're making it available to the general public in a standard retail situation, and that's a revolution. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you guys for your time. I know you're busy and you got to get back to Columbus. So thanks for watching, everyone, and we appreciate it, and have a great day.